A historicist stated regarding dying and rising gods that the appeal to ideal types fails in this arena because it decontextualizes each case in terms of the cultural specific milieus to which they belong. In other words, classifying disparate examples of something under an ideal type fails to account for the sociological and cultural factors involved. This strikes me as a misunderstanding of the whole notion of an ideal type, which recognizes that there are both broad similarities and distinct differences, and seeks to explain the latter precisely in terms of the sociological and cultural factors that drive them. The ideal type encompasses these very distinctions, does it not? Would love to hear your thoughts. Derek Bennett.
I agree with that completely. It's just that the ideal type, he's describing it. What you're doing is to see what these disparate phenomena have in common, and then using that as a kind of a yardstick to understand the differences. So it's not, I forget who said this, but it's not like you're saying all these things are just the same, let's put them in the same box. I see how people can think that, but that's not the case. And I think there are some major scholars like Helmut Kester, who I was delighted to be a student of, and others who seem to have forgotten what an ideal type is. What is being described here is sort of the apologetics approach that, well, the differences are greater than the similarities. Nobody denies that. The point is, how is it that such disparate things in many ways have such a striking similarity? Despite that, of course, you're going to have, like Rudolf Otto said in his great book, The Idea of the Holy, that he thinks that all religious revelations that founded religions were of the same type, just based on the descriptions of them in their different scriptures. It was a numinous encounter, something triggered an experience of the mysterium tremendum and so on. He says, however, this is pre-rational, and when people in different cultures began to try to understand it and apply reason to it and all that, well, of course, their attempts reflected the culture they were in. That's why they differ so much, but boy, oh boy, look at what they have in common. Shankara in India, Meister Eckhart in Germany, these guys never heard of each other. They never read each other's writings, but wow, look at this. So I think that that is why you have many, many differences, but I don't see, like when you've got a god or godling who comes to a bad end after something he did or something someone did to him, like Osiris being betrayed and murdered by his brother Set, and then Jesus by Judas, and so on. And then there is, he dies in some way or other, doesn't matter which one. And then often there are holy women who are looking for the missing hero and eventually find him and manage to raise him from the dead. And he then becomes divine or given the throne or whatever. I don't think that's a coincidence. It seems to me it all goes back to ultimately agricultural mythology, that the dying and rising god represents John Barleycorn, the spirit of the fields, as they call him in the great movie The Wicker Man, or similarly the death and rebirth of the sun. Once it gets, the days decline and then they start getting longer again. It's kind of two versions of the same thing. Seems to me that that's why it's so, like Acharya, she lay great store by astrotheology, where she said You tell me why the cross is a sacred symbol in various cultures that could never have had any contact with each other. Well, it's because of seeing the same night sky. I think she's basically right about that. What did they have in common? The cultures are very, very different, but they have certain commonalities. And they keep evolving in their own directions, but they still have the same basic fabula or the same basic mythemes that come up. So I don't see how you can deny, especially on these terms, that the ideal type of the dying and rising God explains an awful lot.